my main area of interest is information literacy and inquiry learning, and I was delighted to become runner-up in the 2016 Lilac Information Literacy Awards and to be shortlisted again this year. I was also very humbled to be awarded the BEM in this New Year's Honours for services to libraries. And one of the expectations of receiving such an award is to continue giving to your community, which I hope I'm doing through these webinars. I'm an international presenter, blogger and writer for the CILIP Information Professional, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Great School Libraries Working Party. And in my spare time, I run an online CPD forum for school library staff called Library Staff Love Learning. So you will have spotted already that I'm a librarian. So why am I here today to talk to educators about inquiry learning? Well, I believe that when the skill set of the school librarian and teacher come together in inquiry learning, our students benefit from our joint collaboration. However, I do understand that many of you may not have access to school libraries. And in showing you this framework, I will also be giving you access to a support forum. So although I would love for you to all to say after you've heard me talk that you must get access to a school librarian, I realise that this is something that you may need to work towards, and starting your journey with FOSIL will only enhance that collaboration in the future. So in order to understand where FOSIL sits in the curriculum, I believe first that we need to understand why this is important. So in a world where information is growing exponentially, the tools for inquiring and interpreting that knowledge must be at least as important as the actual knowledge itself. So any curriculum that doesn't explicitly address these needs for pupils to develop the skills to find, evaluate and interpret information is missing something very important. These essential skills for inquiring and interpreting knowledge are supported through FOSIL, our framework of skills for inquiry learning. In my world of school libraries, these skills are underpinned by information literacy. But what is that? So this is a definition of information literacy. So information literacy is the ability to think critically and make balanced judgments about any information we find and use. It empowers us as citizens to reach and express informed views and to engage fully with society. We live in an age of access to information like never before. Information literacy is a difficult term for people to understand, and it's mistakenly thought of anything to do with library or even computer skills. The Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals in the UK redefined the term that you can see on the screen, which developed a definition which includes the importance of being a global citizen, which you can see here. So UNESCO has said that information literacy empowers people in all walks of life to seek, evaluate, use and create information effectively to achieve their personal, social, occupational and educational goals. It is a basic human right in a digital world and promotes social inclusion in all nations. So this definition of information literacy as a basic human right and its considerable impact on society. But where does information literacy sit within the context of all the other literacies we talk about, such as digital or media literacy? So this is the information literacy landscape created by Jane Secker and Emma Coogan, which clearly demonstrates how a number of key literacies fit together with information literacy being at its heart. But where does it sit with what you do as a teacher? Information literacy is complex and it means different things to different people. And even then, it's not always clear what it means and what it entails. As you can see, information literacy has its limitations and is not enough on its own. Once you head into academic literacy, for example, information literacy is only a small part of this. So in order to understand this more broadly, I want to introduce you very briefly to IFLA, which is the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, School Library Guidelines, which uses the term media and information literacy, which broadens out to include all of the above through inquiry. So information literacy in this context, we're talking about research skills basically. So IFLA is an international body with nearly 60 years of research in school libraries. So if you've never heard of IFLA or seen their school library guidelines, I'd recommend that you take a look. As you can see from the website as a starting point. IFLA talks about these literacies together as media and information literacy, which is only a small but very important part of the bigger picture. It's important to recognise how this opens up inquiry learning. As a librarian, my main focus has always been on media and information literacy. But recognising my role within inquiry learning has opened doors to teaching and learning I never imagined before. So this quote from the IFLA School Library Guidelines says, "It considers the process of a search for information as well as the product of the search. It calls for an awareness of the complexity of learning from information. Learning from information is not a routine or standardized task, and it involves the active as well as the cognitive domains." So it talks about inquiry-based learning going beyond the location of information and actually taking an active part in it. So I want to go back to the importance of school librarians in this process and give you a little bit of history. As far back as 1968, schools that taught the International Baccalaureate began to recognise the importance of school libraries within inquiry. They recognised that media and information literacy was essential within an inquiry approach learning. Since the mid-1980s, media and information literacy researcher Daniel Callison talked about information, media, critical thinking, creative thinking as concepts enveloped in inquiry. So in other words, media and information literacy on its own is not enough. So giving our students research skills is not enough, as it's only a small part of what we do. I hope that this is helping you see a theme. Research and finding information through media and information literacy is not enough in itself is inquiry learning. So before I continue, I want to touch on something that you may be wondering about. Why do I keep talking about inquiry rather than project-based learning? And I just want to show you the link. So project-based learning is an inquiry-based instructional approach that reflects a learner-centered environment and concentrates on learners' application of disciplinary concept, tools, experiences, and technologies to research the answer to questions and solve real-world problems. So the difference is one of emphasis. Inquiry, more broadly, requires students to find and use a variety of sources of information and ideas to increase their understanding of a problem, topic, or issue which may or may not be tied to a real-world problem. So as project-based learning is an inquiry-based instructional approach, it's essential that we continue to explore and understand the many stages of inquiry. So this is the definition of inquiry. Inquiry is a dynamic process of being open to wonder and puzzlement and coming to know and understand the world. And as such, it is a stance that pervades all aspects of life and is essential to the way in which knowledge is created. So how can we support our students to achieve this? How do we get our students to the point in this direction? Teachers are providing knowledge, but how do we help students engage with that knowledge too? To gain knowledge for themselves, to create knowledge and understanding that's new to them. This has to be through research, or as you now know the term to be media and information literacy. So there are several different levels of inquiry. So inquiry is not a monolithic thing. In other words, it's open to change. There are different levels of inquiry, and it probably looks different in different subjects, in different year groups, and in different topics. I like this chart adapted by John Royce, as it shows how important the role of the teacher staff are within inquiry. The confirmation inquiry, which you can see at the top, is guided the whole way by the teacher or the librarian, but as the students gain more confidence, the role they play reduces. But it doesn't disappear completely. Even within an open inquiry, which you can see at the bottom with no ticks in the box, the students will still need guidance to support in finding quality resources and when they choose their topic. I also want to highlight that procedure, which is the third box along, in this content, we're talking about FOSIL as the framework. You'll see that this level of inquiry process, the input from the teacher librarian about the process reduces, as there is an expectation that as the students have begun to understand the process, they don't have to be taught it every time. So there's a huge range in types of task, the amount of teacher librarian input, and the level of student choice. But how can we help our students to gain the skills they need to eventually arrive at an open inquiry that they can tackle on their own? One way to do this is through FOSIL. But before I show you FOSIL, I just want to give you a little bit of history about where it came from. FOSIL is based on the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum, showing the progression of inquiry skills over a student's time at school, which is based on Barbara Striplin's model of inquiry, which you can see here. Barbara Striplin was a Director of Library Services for the New York City Department of Education, is now Professor Emeriti of Syracuse University, and the creator of the Stripling model of inquiry. A model of inquiry can give a number of stages, and we know that there are many different models. But basically, at its simplest, is what are we looking for? We're all on a journey and recognise that there is an inquiry process. FOSIL allows us to map these skills in order to make sure that they are taught effectively, ensuring that there are plenty of disciplinary and interdisciplinary opportunities for students to practice them as they move through the school, and FOSIL does exactly that. So FOSIL helps pupils to make links to prior knowledge, to ask good questions, to find, access and use trustworthy information, to use that information to build knowledge and understanding, and to understand the inquiry as a process and themselves as the inquirer. So if inquiry is a tool to help students build knowledge and understanding from information, these are the skills that it explicitly develops. The idea of finding and using trustworthy information is what we mean by media and information literacy and doing research. FOSIL can be thought of as three things: a map of the inquiry process, a framework of skills, and a toolkit of resources to support the process. So before I show you FOSIL, I just want to explain what FOSIL is not. It's not just media and information literacy. It's not to support just an open-ended inquiry. It's not only for the higher end of school. It's not only for big projects or coursework. It's not for the brightest or the weakest. It's for everybody. It's not for developing skills rather than content. And it's not easy or comfortable. So basically, we need to understand that actually FOSIL is far more than this. So after that big build-up, here is FOSIL. So FOSIL stands for a framework of skills for inquiry learning, which is a model of the inquiry process, an underlying continuum of inquiry skills. It's an approach to learning in which teacher and librarian are united, taking both responsibility to influence, orient, and motivate the pursuit of learning, using a process of discovery that encourages curiosity and the love of learning. It's becoming more apparent that our students need these skills once they leave school, especially as more information becomes online. If we look at what has happened recently with climate change and the coronavirus, the need for our students to interact and be critical with information they find online is becoming increasingly important. But what do I mean by these skills? So let's take a closer look at this cycle and the resources freely available for you to use, with credit of course. I'll be using examples of worksheets created for a Year 7 science project on heat transfer throughout this explanation. So we start with connect at the top. It's important that we understand that even our younger students have a background knowledge, and find out what they already know brings them to the centre of the inquiry process. Our students don't live in a bubble. They are likely to know something about the topic, either from siblings, parents, peers, or TV, or something they've even read. Rather than starting with teaching what they need to know, help them understand that they are already part of this learning process. This is also a good starting point to help them gain background knowledge and knowledge from each other within a class discussion. So as I said, I would share some of the resources available to support teaching FOSIL, and I will do so after every stage so that you can see how this fits together. So this is an example of a Connect worksheet used in a science inquiry project on heating and cooling. It allows you to put the overarching question or topic in the middle, and then depending on the age of your students, get them to fill this in. Generally, this would be after an introduction from the teacher about their topic and a discussion with the class about what they already know about the subject. This may be a little or a lot, but this is how the students begin to put themselves into the centre of inquiry. This is not prescriptive. You know your students best. You may find that you need to guide your students more at the beginning to help them fill in each thought bubble with guidance. As they use this worksheet more and more and become familiar with the amount of support they need will be different. You can also see the orange circle at the bottom of the page, which helps the students guide to where they are in the FOSIL cycle. So next is wonder. So wonder is, what do I want to find out? Here is where you identify the questions you need to ask. This is where you can start with an overarching question from the teacher, but then the students can expand with their own questions throughout the investigation or research. If a question is Googleable, then it is not a good question. What I mean by that is that if students can type the question into Google and copy and paste the answer, then no learning has taken place. A good question needs student input, a thought process, and learning needs to happen. The basic difference between a question that is simple to answer, where the emphasis is on finding the right answer, and a complex question, where the emphasis is on building and constructing knowledge and understanding from information drawn from different sources. Oh, never mind. Sorry, gone too far. So this worksheet has already been filled in as an example of how your students may work with this. It's important for students to recognise that they have background knowledge which has either come from what they already know or conversations in the class, or what teachers have shared, or what the ideas might read. This gets written in the top left-hand corner where it says, what do I already know? Helping them to understand that the answer is not just found, but needs investigating. Therefore, the right-hand side is helping them to wonder what they now need to know to fill the gaps that are missing. So the top right says, how will I help? How will I use this for my inquiry? This worksheet can also be given to students blank, so they can come up with their own ideas and questions. The circles again at the bottom, as you can see, are now in the connect and wonder stage. And we will now move on to the investigate stage. So investigate is the research part, which is generally where, as a school librarian, this is where I would sit here and support a teacher. So there are so many skills that fit into this section. Here it says that students should know what scholarly resources are available and how to use them effectively. This is so critical for students as well as teachers. Making sure your students know how to search the online academic resources you buy into, as well as searching the internet effectively, is essential. Don't forget that students like to use the path of least resistance and are used to typing the question into Google. We need to show our students that with the right skills, Google does not always find the answer they need the quickest. They need to be guided to use the academic resources available to them and given credit for using them. At this stage, when students do need to head online, they need to be aware of the skill of evaluating websites. How do they know if the website they are using is of good quality? Again, do you check where they're finding their information? Do you expect a reference list or a bibliography? Do your students have the skills to find something that you can trust? This takes time, but the effort of learning and understanding this is important. Some of the other things covered in this section are things like note-taking, paraphrasing, and summarising, but there's lots more too. Here is one worksheet example that supports this stage. So moving into the investigate stage has the students beginning to think about construct and express as they begin to research and find the information, as you can see from the circles at the bottom. This stage is likely to create more questions as they move through it. It's important that your students keep their main question in focus. These are questions that don't have right or wrong answers. These are questions that need to be thought about critically. This worksheet has been filled in again so that you can see how it works. It helps them to understand that it's okay to cut and paste or copy relevant information as long as the source is documented, as you can see on the left. What I like about this is it asks them to explain their thinking. As you can see on this worksheet, the students are now thinking about what experiments need to be done next because of the information that they have already found. This encourages students to write down their thinking and thought process, allowing teachers to see where they're headed and why. This worksheet assesses understanding and then helps students to put their ideas into actions. There are usually 3 or 4 sheets relating to the main questions needing answering. And then we move on to construct. So construct. Do I need everything that I've found? Does it answer my question? I like this stage as it allows you to fully explain that although that your students may have found lots of information, not all of it will be relevant to answer their question. Students often get frustrated at this point. Why did they read and find all the information if they were not going to use it all? This is where we can explain why wider reading is important for understanding and that none of this time is wasted. Most importantly at this stage, we need to be asking if our students understand what they have learned and can demonstrate that. So this worksheet supports the construct stage, helping students, again, focus and bring together the information that they found to specifically answer their question. And I want to show you another worksheet that also supports this stage. So this is a research organizer and is used to encourage students to engage with the information they're finding, specifically asking why this view might be held. So this helps students to think more deeply about the information they're finding through explaining their understanding of what other people's views are. It helps them to view the world beyond their own understanding, taking others' views into account, allowing them to practice thinking critically and to explore the world beyond their own understanding. So on this screen, you can see that they've got on the left-hand side one point of view, and on the right-hand side, a contrasting point of view. It goes down into the middle where it says, what are the main reasons that this point of view might be held? It's important that they are beginning to understand the information that they're finding. The second part of this research organiser pushes the students to draw a conclusion for what they found. It's no longer just finding all they can on a subject like our younger students like to. There's a real purpose for their research, and they need to explain this through their conclusion. Again, the circles are in the blue and pink, indicating that students is now into the construct and moving on to the express stage of the cycle. So express, how can I present what I find? Who are my audience? And have I given credit for what I've found? So unless you're going to be assessed on your presentation skills, this should be one of the last things you ask your students to do. It's not about how pretty their PowerPoint or poster looks. This is about the quality of the information that they have found. Many students waste a lot of time creating wonderful PowerPoints with fantastic pictures, but the quality of the information is very poor. I'd recommend that unless you're assessing your students on their presentation skills, you should only tell them once they have found the information that they need. You may end up with something that doesn't look very good, but I can guarantee the information will be of much higher standard. And within this stage, we expect citing and referencing. So whilst there are many online tools to support this, in Word and Google Docs, for example, this easy worksheet helps even the youngest students recognise the information they need to create a bibliography. This then helps us to move on to the reflect stage. So reflect, have I done everything I need to? Have I answered the question? It's important to understand that they can go back to any part of the cycle if they think they've missed something. These are the next worksheets that will help them focus on whether they're ready to hand in their information. So there are two worksheets to support the reflective stage. The one on the left is very simple, and the one on the right is for more advanced, asking if they have done everything that they need to throughout the process. They're about to hand their work in, and before they hand it in, questioning whether they need to do something else or whether it's finished. As I said, you don't have to use all of these resources within one project. Any of these individual worksheets can be used within individual lessons and can be used to taught individual skills. And they can be found under whatever part of the FOSIL cycle you're looking for. So I must now show you where you can find them. So the FOSIL group website is where you can get started. This completely free tool is for you to use and share as you want with credit. As I've already said, the creator of FOSIL, Darryl Turian, has adapted it from the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum, and they also provide their resources free. There are over 3.2 million students in 4,236 schools in the New York district alone using this, with over now 200 people registered on the FOSIL group website, where teachers, librarians and academics are sharing ideas and lessons. So this is the FOSIL group homepage, and you can get more support from the forum. The web address is at the top so that you can find this website later. You can access a copy of the cycle that I've just shown you and individual explanations of each part of the cycle here. It's important that you understand that the underlying of the FOSIL cycle is a framework of skills, showing the progression of inquiry skills over a student's time at school, mapping these skills in order to make sure that they are taught effectively, and there are plenty of disciplinary and interdisciplinary opportunities for students to practice them as they move through the school is a vital part of planning for an effective inquiry learning. You can look at these skills frameworks in the FOSIL cycle tab that you can see by the arrow pointing. And I'm going to show you how, show you the whole framework, but it's very small writing, so I don't want you to, you're not expected to read this. The reason I want to show you this slide is it explains that it runs from our youngest students to our eldest students, and it's about community. It's about knowing what others are teaching and will support your own teaching. So if you work together, there's no need for you to all teach the same skill in year 9, for example. So if you know that referencing has been taught in history, then reinforcing it in geography is a good idea. It also allows for differentiation because it allows you to see the skills needed in all of the year groups prior to your year, supporting the option of teaching the skill needed for an individual child. If a student is not at the level you would expect for year 7, then look at the year 6 skills and work from there, for example. These are the building blocks needed for students to succeed, and we should not expect them to know how this all works by osmosis. Just like the knowledge you need to teach your subject, these skills also need to be taught in order for our students to become independent learners. So let's examine this document just a little closer. So this is the year 6 to 9 progression, and as you will see, there are sections that are in bold. These are priority skills, skills that students are assessed on and must be able to demonstrate that they can use. So 8.1, which says revise the question or problem as needed to arrive at a manageable topic or inquiry. This is the connect stage, and 8A is the skill connected to that stage. So express the big idea and the relation of your own topic of interest to that idea through a mind map using pictures and words. So as you can see, in 8.1, the priority skill within Connect assumes that the student has already connected with the information that they have and are beginning to think about the question at this stage. They understand that in order to connect, they need to do a little bit of research first in order to guide them to their question. And 8.2 is a priority skill, so refine questions to guide the research for different types of information. And 8B is talking about planning an inquiry through STEM subjects in particular, opening inquiry to the whole curriculum. So 8B says plan inquiry to test hypothesis and validate thesis. So within Investigate, students will be able to use different format sources as well as describe the priority skills, like in 8.3. So in order to do this, they need to know what's available to them and how to navigate them. The skills needed for this, as we've already touched on, will bring things like keywords, learning to navigate around academic sources and understanding bias, etc. Within each year group, the Investigate part of the framework, you'll find areas that you'll feel comfortable in supporting, and others will be right out of your comfort zone. We have all been there. This is a journey of discovery for ourselves too, and important that we realise that reaching out for help with this for ourselves is important too. If there's anything on this framework that you need clarifying, it's always good to reach out on the FOSIL forum group, which I'll show you a little later. And I want to show you how the stages progress too. So this is year 8 on the left onto year 9 on the right. The express stage is usually where citation and referencing comes in. But you can see in year 9, there is no longer citation and referencing. Whereas in year 8 it says, so 8.7 says create product authentic reasons and audiences. It's now looking at STEM skills specifically. They talk about, as you can see in 8.I, they talk about using technology tools to organise information. And it's hoped that the skills of citation and referencing is now part of the students' arsenal by the time they're in Year 9, giving an opportunity to include another skill at this stage, expanding their different ways of learning. This is also easier to understand if you're looking at the framework. So I'd urge you to find the document when you have time. So if you're using the FOSIL resources and can't find an assessment or worksheet you need, more can be found on the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum website, where the FOSIL resources originate from. So the assessment documents can be found by grade or standard depending on what you are assessing. So I've added the website address to this slide so you can find it later. And the assessment grades run from pre-kindergarten to grade 12. This is the new 2019 continuum and is currently being upgraded by the FOSIL group website. You can select the year group or grade you require at the top, and under each group, the priority skills are listed. When choosing the required assessment skills by clicking the link to the Word document is downloaded. As you can see, there are many to choose from, which is why I would recommend that you start with the FOSIL workbook and resources, as they've been based on and developed by these assessments. However, you may have a very specific need, in which case you can refer back to these assessments. But I must show you how and where you can access the FOSIL resources and, of course, get help from the forum. So heading back to the FOSIL website, this is where you will find, under the resources tab, where you'll find the workbooks and the worksheets. The best way is to find what you need in the search tab boxes on the left that says description or tag. In the tag box, you can also search by subject, but also year group. Remember that anything you find can be adapted and edited in order to make suitable for the year group you are teaching. You can also filter by workbook. So these resources are already created and ready and made. So if you find something that is useful, you can look at the PDF and you can use the editable Word version. So I've done a lot of talking today about inquiry within the curriculum and how FOSIL in particular can support that. I'd also like to conclude by showing you how FOSIL has been used beyond the school environment and has with a project-based learning been used to solve real-world problems within a significant STEM project. So the Teen Tech Awards is about enabling students to apply science and technology to real-world problems. This has been done alongside research to support their ideas. Darryl Turian, founder of FOSIL, has successfully supported several students to winning this award through using FOSIL as the foundation of their research process, without question demonstrating the robustness of an approach to learning through inquiry within a national award and a real-world setting. So my final slide is to remind you why I believe FOSIL is the way forward in inquiry-based learning. Why in general and why FOSIL in particular? So framework, it's a framework of skills which support each other. It's generic but adaptable resources, and new resources can be created to meet specific needs. Through inquiry, pupils can develop metacognition, information literacy, and higher order skills such as critical thinking. It's a way of developing understanding and enthusiasm in a subject and giving pupils agency. FOSIL is a way of supporting teachers and students in this task. Because FOSIL is a framework rather than just a list of skills, we can anticipate the level of competency in a particular skill we might expect from pupils in particular year group and see how they develop over time. Because the resources have a generic look, schools that are using this are finding that students are becoming more familiar with the stages of the FOSIL cycle and some of the tools used. Because the resources are adaptable, We can develop them to meet the specific subject and the class needs. And if you have a school library, collaboration is key. I would argue that inquiry is the best and perhaps only way to explicitly meet the challenges that David Deutsch alluded to early in my earlier slide when he said, in a world where information is growing exponentially, the tools for acquiring and interpreting that knowledge must be at least as important as the actual knowledge itself. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We have a few questions. You actually partially answered this one, but I'll still read it out to you. Okay. Could you please draw the line between, just to avoid general confusion, could you explain the difference and draw the line between project-based learning, FOSIL network, and STEM or STEAM education?
So repeat that again, the difference between project-based learning?
Yeah, FOSIL framework and STEM.
Yeah. Okay, so project-based learning generally tends to be about real work, bringing in a real-world activity, which I demonstrated at the end, that it can be used for real-world projects such as the Teen Tech. FOSIL can be used within any subject, so it's not, generally speaking, inquiry learning tends to, or inquiries or research tend to look at subjects such as history and geography, whereas FOSIL, as I demonstrated, can be used for a scientific research project in science, or it can be used in a technology subject. The subject itself doesn't matter. The skill set is what's important.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, whenever working with information, how do you teach students to verify the credibility or the authenticity of the information they find?
Okay, so this is a big question, and we need to do lots of website evaluation specifically. The sooner that you start teaching students to evaluate good quality information, the better. We tend to find that schools tend to leave this until, they're in year 10, 11, and actually we should be teaching this much, much earlier. The tools to teach website evaluation or understanding the quality of information are embedded within FOSIL. So, it's about looking at authenticity. It's about looking at the person who's written it. There are tools that can be used which are more like checklists, but actually it's progressed to, as children look at online resources, checking the information away from the website that you are currently looking at to verify that others are talking about the same subject and the same information. It is a very difficult skill to teach, but it's one that is essential in today's world. And through FOSIL and the FOSIL forum, those type of questions can be answered more succinctly if you have a specific question. That's what the forum is there for.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One last question. Can you tell the difference? What's the difference between informational literacy and reading literacy?
Oh, good question. Okay, so information literacy is, we are talking about the ability to research and find and evaluate information. Reading literacy has to come into that, because unless you can actually read and understand, then you're not going to get very far. Reading for learning is connected, certainly, but they're two slightly different skill sets, both of which are needed. And I think without reading literacy, or reading for understanding and knowledge, it's very difficult to be information literate. Because understanding the words and the terminology that you are using leads to you being able to search and evaluate information.